Hello everyone, welcome back. So today we are going to continue the minimizing of the risk of harm, and we are going to talk about tinnitus. The tinnitus. So severe tinnitus is a plasticity disease, and severe tinnitus is often caused by activation of neuroplasticity. Many forms of severe tinnitus have similarities with central neuropathic pain, and tinnitus may be different from. It could be a large individual variation in severity. So the tinnitus is ringing or the sound in the ear, and that could be, it is considered as in a different intensity from one person to another person. It could be very severe and debilitating in one person. One person may be able to tolerate, but they are all considered as caused by activation of the neuroplasticity. So what is tinnitus? Tinnitus is hearing nonsense or unintended sound or that do not come from the outside. So these are phantom sounds. So there's nobody else around you can hear those sounds. So those are the sounds which our brain or mind is perceiving, but they are considered as a phantom sound. They are not a real sound from outside source. So they are created within the nervous system. So it has severe adverse effect on the person and the quality of the life of a person, and the person it's difficult to stay in a very quiet environment because those sounds are exaggerated, and the sounds when there's nobody and you are sitting in a very quiet room, and they are perceived as much higher in intensity, and so this tinnitus has different types. So the severe tinnitus can have two separate effects on a person. The perception of sound that does not come from the environment, and the suffering, which is a very bothersome tinnitus and cause irritation and stress in the person. There are different types of tinnitus, and also tinnitus is referred as plasticity disorders. So we have patient can have a mild tinnitus, can have moderate tinnitus, or can have severe tinnitus. So mild tinnitus does not interfere noticeably with the everyday life. The moderate tinnitus may cause some annoyance and may be perceived as unpleasant, but it's tolerable. In some cases, it gets exaggerated when there's a quiet environment, and may be suppressed when there's more people or more noise around you, and it's not very obvious. And severe tinnitus affect a person's entire life or maybe in different major ways. Patient perception of their tinnitus varies between mild, moderate, and severe. And the severe tinnitus is considered as disabling tinnitus. Severe tinnitus has many similarities with chronic neuropathic pain. There's no visible signs of illness. So if you're looking at the person, you don't see any signs and symptoms, no signs of disease. It's not a life-threatening situation, but just looking at that. But it affects, so if the severe tinnitus is present, it's not going to cause damage, death, or disease, but the annoyance and psychological effect is severe. So it affects the quality of life and causes suffering in a patient, continuous suffering non-stop. The cause is not where the symptoms are. So the symptoms are coming from the ear. Because the sounds come here, but the cause may not be in the ear. There's a strong emotional component. It may result in depression, phonophobia, fear of sound. So fear of sound, getting in the sound, and sometimes getting to a high sound or more noise can also trigger and cause more severe pain in the ear and more difficulty. So the similarity between chronic pain and severe tinnitus is the only tolerable pain is someone else's pain. So that was quote from a French surgeon. Because pain is perception is different from one person to the other person. So pain could be mild pain, moderate pain, severe pain, and unbearable pain. But a pain which is a mild pain and bearable pain for one person may be intolerable for the other person. So we can also say the same thing about tinnitus. Tinnitus is mild, moderate, and severe. Severe is debilitating, and but again, the perception of this sound We have one person may have considered as a mild tinnitus, and the other person may have considered as a severe tinnitus, and they will not be able to tolerate that. So pathology of auditory nervous system have not received the attention they deserve. The role of neuroplasticity has only recently been discovered in this tinnitus. So severe tinnitus and chronic neuropathic pain have many similarities. These are so the tinnitus and chronic neuropathic pain, they are both phantom sensations, and phantom sensations are caused by abnormal activity in the brain, where the brain, so this abnormal activity in the brain has this, like where the pain is coming from, which part of the body, and so where the tinnitus coming from, in the ear. So that's the signal is coming to the brain. The pain is for the phantom pain, the signal is coming that is part of the body, and for the tinnitus, the sound is coming from the ear. So the tinnitus sound that is felt is coming from the ear is made in the brain. The other phantom sensation like tingling and pain that are felt in amputated legs is a phantom sensation made in the brain. So phantom pain, somebody have phantom pain in amputated leg, so the signal is coming to the brain, and that pain is activated, the center is activated and perceived in the brain, but it's not coming from the organ or the limb of the body. Same as tinnitus, it is perceived as coming from the ear, but it is the recent studies have shown that it is perceived in the brain, and the source is not most of the time the source is not the ear. So as we already know, the ear is responsible for hearing and balance. So it has vestibulocochlear nerve is a nerve, which is the 8th cranial nerve, which travels from the ear to the brainstem and to the brain, to the auditory cortex, and it carries the two signals, vestibular signals, which are responsible for balance, and cochlear signal, which is responsible for the hearing. So tinnitus can also occur with severe. So the nerve is cut, and if the nerve is cut and nerve is damaged, a person can still have tinnitus. So that gives you evidence that the nervous system is the site of physiological abnormalities that causes the sensation of the most form of the severe tinnitus, and it is not coming from the ear, because if it is coming from the ear, if you're cutting the nerve or sectioning of the nerve will treat the nerve. It will cause hearing loss, of course, and maybe problem with the balance, but it's not going to treat the tinnitus. The abnormal neural activity that causes the symptoms is not generated in the location where the symptoms are felt, so they are generated outside the ear, and some of tinnitus are also phantom sensation. There are some causes of the tinnitus that may be from the ear, but those are not phantom, and that could be the infection, middle infection, or ear infection, or Meniere's disease. So some kind of this that can cause that. So you have to do like correct diagnosis and to make sure that there's no abnormality, and there are ways to do that. And so we have different tests, clinical testing and pathological testing, and scanning or imaging, and biopsy. So you can do that and to identify that there's a pathology or disease that causes medullary infection, because patient will have redness, swelling, inflammation, pain, and fever, etc. And definitely pain from the ear. Severe chronic tinnitus is a phantom sensation, and it is created in the brain, and the location of illness is in the brain, and it's not in the ear. So earlier it was believed that tinnitus came from the ear, and it was concluded that the cause of tinnitus was something wrong with the ear. So you have to treat the ear for tinnitus. Now we know that most forms of severe tinnitus come from the brain, and tinnitus can occur with severe severed hearing nerve. So with mild and moderate tinnitus, more chances of the source of ear or the nerve, or it could be sensory neural, but the severe form of tinnitus is mostly from the brain. So many part of the brains are involved in tinnitus. We have auditory cortex, which is temporal lobe. We have attention network, we talked earlier. We have distress network and then memory network. So all these different networks, they are involved in the process of tinnitus. So the abnormal connection in brain part of the brain which causes the pathologies or the source of the severe tinnitus. The studies of connectivity between these areas we talk show that the activation of the neuroplasticity can change neural function by altering the connection of the brain. So the alternating connection between these areas of the brain can cause result in tinnitus or neuropathic pain. So result in tinnitus or a phantom, which is a phantom syndrome. So recent studies have also shown the connectivity have shown some form of tinnitus reflected in the changes in connection between different structures of the brain. So the normal connection are altered, and the perception of the these sounds are received by this person. The studies of connectivity show how connection, so we can see the auditory cortex here, and in people with tinnitus, the auditory cortex are connected to parts of the brain that normally are not involved in hearing. So there are all these different parts of hearing. So there were different scores published by this one, and the connectivity is changing from this one, and these connectivities are not present in normal people. There are also multiple parallel connectivity, and in this pattern. So in this image, we see that there are different tinnitus score, and so the neural network model of the tinnitus, which illustrates the brain regions and connections involved in tinnitus perception, distress and mood regulation, and different colors in the network indicate distress aspect of tinnitus process. So different part of the brain and what are the role in this tinnitus can be described as, for example, for the auditory cortex, which is primarily responsible for processing the sound perceptions. And tinnitus, this region remains hyperactive even without external sound input. So even there's no sound, the person is locked or is in the control room, that still this area of the brain is hyperactive and without the presence of the external sound. The dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex, which is also DLPFC, or ventrolateral prefrontal cortex, involves in cognitive control and attention regulation. And anterior cingulate cortex, which regulates attention and cognitive control over distress. And so the subgenual anterior cortex involves emotional regulation and mood. So connection between different parts of the brain changes during the time a person has tinnitus for short duration and long duration. So depending on, so these connections, if the person has tinnitus for short duration, there are different connectivity, and between the left frontal cortex, right frontal lobe, left temporal lobe, right temporal lobe, left parietal lobe, right parietal lobe, and then anterior cingulate cortex and posterior cingulate cortex. So so during these the exposure to the tinnitus or the symptoms of tinnitus for short duration versus long duration. So if it stays for long duration, all these connectivities or connections between these part of the brain are changed. So prior sound stimulation or tinnitus affect the ability of orientation. So the question is that the involvement of the cells, place cells, due to prior stimulation, does it affect our signal? So if you're looking for this hippocampus, normal stable place cells, and we have a baseline 2 hours and 4 hours and 6 hours. So this is an image which appears to be which is a neurophysiological study of neuronal activity and shows the firing of rate of two neurons, cell 1 and cell 2. So we have firing rate and different frequency of cell 1 and cell 2, two place cells, which change over time of controls exposure and sound chamber. And the study examined the spatial perceptive field and electrophysiological responses. So the column number 1, the first one, we present time intervals, the baseline, which is before exposure, then 2 hours after exposure, 4 hours after exposure, and then 6 hours after exposure. So this suggests a study that tracking long-term changes in neural activity following the control stimulus. And this control stimulus is probably the sound, and we can see the changes in the connectivity over the period of time. So the neuronal firing rate, the top of each fire on these panel, they're color coded with heat map. So you can see the heat map indicate firing rate intensity. Red is the highest firing rate, and blue is the lowest firing rate. The spatial distribution inside the image, the distribution of the activity is shown where each neuron is most responsive in this study, and each map overlaps with the movement path of the animal, possible whichever animal study is done in the experiment environment. And the bottom of each panel present a spike waveform recorded from the neurons, and this consistent waveform suggests a stable recording of neuronal activity over time. So the lower picture is giving us in first cell we say the normal activity after the exposure, but at a different firing rate exposure on the spatial area. So for the cell 1, show high firing rate in specific area of the movement path, and location of peak activity remains relatively stable over time, but the area remains almost same, but slight shift in intensity are observed, and long-term retention of spatial tuning after exposure to this sound wave. In cell 2, the second one, also maintain the stable spatial firing pattern. So the spatial firing pattern remains stable, but has lower maximum firing rate compared to cell number 1. The firing pattern remains consistent over 6 hours, indicating persistent activity in the response. So the neural firing pattern remains stable over time, suggesting long-term encoding of sensory experience, and spatial tuning of each wave neural form is preserved, indicating neuron maintain their response properties even hour after exposure. So this could be part of study and investigating plasticity in auditory or spatial processing neurons, which is related to sensory memory and habituation and learning. So this is the same two cells, cell 1 and cell 2, and we can see these place cells affected by prior exposure. So when they are affected by prior these cells were exposed to prior noise, we can see the exposed area. The area is more exposed in cell 1, and the firing pattern remains the same of the neuronal, but the exposure area is changing and is in both cell 1 and cell 2. So it's more severe in cell 2 as compared to cell 1, but they are both exposed when they are affected in the presence of prior sound. So severe tinnitus and altered sound perception of the sound. So severe tinnitus is often accompanied by altered perception of sound. Sounds are distorted. Sound have exaggerated loudness, hyperacusis. So when the person have tinnitus, their sound are distorted and sound are exaggerated. So the patient or the person is more sensitive to sound, and every sound is appear to very loud, which is known as hyperacusis, and the person is unbearable sound and look like a piercing sound. And all these sound, the loud sounds are very unpleasant, and sound are maybe painful and may cause phonophobia, and the person is trying to block their ears and not be able to go out into the exposed different sound, which can cause severe pain and severe pain in the ear. So the tinnitus and severe tinnitus is also associated with the severe mood disorders. It can result in depression and phonophobia, which is the phobia to the sound wave. At the same time, it's very important to understand that the different people react differently to severe tinnitus. So the perception of the sound and pain varies from person to person. It prevents sleep and disturbed sleep. It interferes with intellectual work, and often it can be accompanied by perception of the sound. So this perception of sound is altered in these people who have severe tinnitus for a long time. So there are two ways person can react to tinnitus. Either it's a catastrophic or it confronting the tinnitus and its effect. And so those are two different ways a person can cope with that, and then that also subject to the person perception. So different reaction to tinnitus. So the cause of tinnitus, the person is experienced. There's a reason for tinnitus, and the person experienced this tinnitus. So it could be a non-catastrophic outcome, a confrontation and recovery. So a person may recover by confronting the sound and coping with that sound. If it is a catastrophic outcome, the person will have fear of sound, phonophobia, they avoid noisy environment, and they go into isolation, and they cause, and this isolation will cause depression and more tendency for suicide. So for a person who had tinnitus is very bad today, and I will probably be worse tomorrow, and will I have tinnitus all my life? So there's all continuous thought process and may result in a cycle of depression and isolation. For a person responding in non-catastrophic behavior, say my tinnitus is bad today, but I will be better tomorrow. I'll do something for my tinnitus. I'll try to do some action. Like for example, you can have turn on the sound. So if you are trying to in the room, you turn on fan, or which is causing continued noise or white noise, which so the effect of tinnitus decreases. I'll seek treatment. If it doesn't help, I'll learn to cope with the tinnitus. So I'll go out and try to find the treatment, and if the treatment doesn't help, then I'll try to cope with it. So either the person, depending on the behavior and the person, that person may lead to this severe tinnitus can lead to a catastrophic outcome or non-catastrophic. So the treatment of the affective mood disorder, the tinnitus is normally referred to ear, and it is not produced in the ear, severe tinnitus, but is referred to ear and often placed in focus of the. So all the patient, they're going for the ear treatment, and they get into cycle of from one physician to the other physician, and all these tests done for the ear, but it's not getting treated. So recent studies have shown this the treatment of tinnitus, and we should not be looking at the internet and Google and everything, and try to go for the right person. Have a multiple. You should always have second or third opinion, and go for the second and third opinion. So you're not going for your eye examining and getting treatment for eye over and over again. In case of mild or moderate tinnitus, it may be caused there, but if the eye, I'm saying eye, the ear. So you don't want to go for the eye, ear treatment and getting diagnosis for ear and treatment for the ear. But if the ear is clear, there's no inflammation, there's no redness, there's no infection, or there's infection and infection is treated, and the person still get into tinnitus, then it's always good to go for further examination and further treatment to see what is the source, and which is mostly in the brain. And then, so the few of the accompanying symptoms are hyperacusis, phonophobia, and dysphonia, which are often ignored, because when the person have the tinnitus and they go for that, and all the focus is on the ear, and the ear is being treated and evaluated again and again. But it's also important to do a more detailed examination and clinical examination and history, because the patient will have hyperacusis, they have all the sound, they appear more loud. Person will have phonophobia, they will be not going out and try to avoid all the situation where they are exposed to the sound, loud sound, because loud sound are very severe, painful and uncomfortable. And dysphonia, they will maybe the sound may be distorted, or they will be listening, the sound may be distorted in different perception. And thus, the symptoms, ignoring the symptoms of tinnitus will result more problem and more prolonged tinnitus and more severe outcome of it. So we're still in process of learning and understanding more detail. The hyperacusis, reduced tolerance to sound in general, is one of the symptoms. So the patient will have low tolerance of sound, any sound in general. So any sound which is they have severe, they will be unbearable and they have severe pain or 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 they cannot tolerate that sound. So they are involved in non-classical pathway. What are the different pathways which are involved, and so we are still trying to understand the cause and pathology. What is the cause and pathology of this disease of hyperacusis? Also, the phonophobia, the fear of uncertain sound. So what are the different sounds they are afraid of? So getting the history, which are different sounds. Um, are these sound always fearful, or they're sometimes fearful and sometimes they're okay? And what is the cause and pathophysiology of is still unknown, and we're still working on it. Dysphonia, a dislike of specific sound, so they don't like somebody screaming or crying or anything. So specific sound, just for example, they don't dislike it. So asking what is the main problem and is it present with tinnitus or it is separate disease. So understanding this is very critical. If somebody has that, this was present before the tinnitus developed or it developed after tinnitus, and cause and pathophysiology of still dysphonia still unavailable. So we are still in the process in the studies and trying to find out the cure for that. This is another called exploding head syndrome, where sudden very loud sound feeling in someone from inside the head. So this the disease which is diagnosed as exploding head syndrome, a severe loud sound which is coming from inside the head, and person will think that my head is going to explode. So the question is, does it occur with tinnitus? Is it reticular formation pathology? Is it similarity to the REM sleep or sleep behavior disorders, or and the cause and pathophysiology of exploding head syndrome is also unknown right now. So that was the end of this chapter, and thank you.